The Epoch has been buffed, but was it enough? That is the question that we'll be looking to answer today together. The Epoch, which, by the way, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, is a very interesting support weapon. It oftentimes shows a glimpse of greatness, but while it does have its moments, the weapon has so many severe disadvantages that may leave one wondering whether it's worth all of its downsides. So first, what did they fix today? Today's update stated that they've decreased the Epoch spread by 75%. If you're unsure what the spread means, spread is the same as bloom, which is essentially how much your bullets deviate from the center of your crosshair when you shoot. In simpler words, the Epoch is now way more accurate than it used to be. And yes, this is very noticeable in game. I also believe the weapon received a stealth buff in the form of an ergonomics improvement. But until that's confirmed by data miners, this may just kind of be placebo. So the Epoch's a lot more accurate, but does that make it good? To answer that question, we must first try to understand what is this weapon really meant for. When understanding the purpose of this weapon, we can better compare with other support weapons within the same niche and draw a stronger conclusion. So first, swarm clearing. Is it a weapon meant to be utilized to get rid of large numbers of smaller enemies, much like the grenade launcher or the stalwart? Well, the weapon, even when fully charged, has an AoE radius of only 3 to 5 meters. So no, you're not really going to be pulling that off effectively. The weapon also only carries 3 shots. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on. What about medium-sized unit killers such as laser cannons or the anti-material rifle? And honestly, when using it to kill berserkers or biospewers or flesh mobs, it doesn't quite feel right. It takes multiple shots to kill a flesh mob, and it feels like it's way too costly in terms of ammunition to be using its shots on units such as biospewers or berserkers. It really does not feel like it's worth it at all. So that leaves us with the big boys of the game: the impalers, bio-titans, hulks, tanks, harvesters, and such. And okay, we can see some glimpses of greatness here. The Epoch can 2-shot a charger, 2-shot a bio-titan, 1-shot an impaler, 1-shot hulks if accurately aimed, and it 1-shots harvesters as well. So that's really good, but why does it not click with most players? I think that's because the weapon has a little bit too many downsides. Where with most weapons within the same niche, such as Quasar, recoilless rifle, EATs, and such, they all have very few downsides. It does feel like the Epoch, on the other hand, has a little bit too many. The Epoch, one advantage of it is that it holds 3 shots, which is unlike any of the other anti-tank options, but it does have a lengthy 4.2 second reload time, which is the longest out of all of these anti-tank choices. But the reload will come in 2 separate stages though, so you could technically half reload, then move on and finish the reloading off after repositioning. Which brings me to another weakness of this weapon: the reload is completely stationary. So if you find yourself being pushed by bugs or illuminate enemies, you will likely struggle to create enough space to continue to be able to deal anti-tank damage. On the same stationary note, the weapon also takes roughly 3 seconds to go from 0 to fully charged, along the same lines of a Quasar, which means you'll oftentimes find yourself like a sitting duck for 3 seconds as you wait for your weapon to charge up, unless you have a warp pack or are using corners to your advantage. Most case scenarios though, realistically, you will find this will expose you for a little bit too long, making yourself vulnerable to overseers and basically every automaton, which also means you're very susceptible to flinching, which can make your life dramatically harder against automatons or overseers. And if you do flinch, you'll just have to waste that shot, because if you hold a shot for even half a second longer, you will kill yourself and blow the Epoch with you. That is a very risky move with every single shot. So you might think, okay, but Takibo, the Railgun has the same mechanics and people don't have an issue with that. So what's the catch with the Epoch? The catch is the Railgun, once it reaches its minimum threshold, it already has an armor penetration value of 5. Meaning if you just do the bare minimum charge up with the Railgun, you're already dealing max armor penetration damage to all of the big enemies in Helldivers 2. You just hold the railgun shot for longer if you want to increase its damage on that specific shot. The Epoch, on the other hand, though, is different. If you don't bring your shot to fully charged every single time, your shots will only have a 4 armor penetration value. So if you charge your shot to, let's say, 80% of the way, you're not even going to be dealing anti-tank damage, which means you have to take the risk every single time. Whereas with the railgun, you don't have to. You can play it completely safe and still walk around the map one-shotting hulks, berserkers, devastators, and whatever. Which reminds me, the railgun is also perfectly accurate, as is the Quasar, and that's another downside of the Epoch. I'm not talking about the spread fix that they applied today, I'm talking about the intense drop off and generally harder shot to hit. Now, I definitely do think that this is a skill issue and you will get used to the Epoch as you use it more and more, but again, out of all of the anti-tank choices, it's probably the least accurate of them all. So in other words, the Epoch is extremely dangerous, fairly inaccurate, and very limiting with the movement as well. Most of the other anti-tank choices don't have all of these downsides. They'll have one of these downsides, or they'll have to carry a backpack, but that's about it. Now let's take the Quasar for example. How can the Epoch realistically compete? The Quasar has more damage. The Quasar is perfectly accurate, it is a hit scan weapon, it requires no reload, and there is zero risk of self-killing. Well, close to zero risk. There's literally only one area where the Epoch beats the Quasar cannon, and that's in by having a much faster fire rate. But personally, I don't really think fire rate is really much of a concern when we're speaking about weapons that are built to one-shot Bile Titans, Hulks, and such. Now, I must clarify that I don't think the Epoch is like an awful weapon. I honestly think it's like a high B tier support weapon for Terminids, but we can't deny it. The weapon has way too many downsides when comparing it with the other choices. You know the saying, high risk, high reward? Well, in the case of the Epoch is extremely high risk and mediocre reward. I honestly think that this weapon deserves a little bit more love. They don't need to like increase damage on it or anything like that. I think the damage is fine. I just think it has way too many downsides for too little upsides. I do also understand that the point of this weapon and this war bond was to be a really high risk, high reward type of situation. So if that's the case, then one way this weapon could be buffed tremendously without becoming overpowered is by increasing the AoE by a lot. Well, what this would result is in by us being able to use it on say chargers or impalers, and by doing that it wipes out some of the reinforcements beside it. This would make it a fairly different anti-tank weapon. One that not only can deal decent anti-tank damage, but it can also get rid of chaff while you're working on those big guys. There is no other anti-tank weapons in the game that fills this niche, other than maybe the ultimatum. So why not go down that path? The foundation's already built. Let me know what you guys think this weapon deserves. Do you think it needs a buff, or do you think it's perfectly fine where it is? I'm actually curious what you guys think. Personally, I think there's far too many risks for far too little rewards. Rewards that can be found elsewhere in any of the other anti-tank solutions. I think it's a B tier weapon for bugs, and I would give it about a C to D tier for both bots and Illuminate. Let me know what you guys think though, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace!